Hey, it's Drybear. And we need to talk about the DPS rankings for Season 3, Week number 1. Considering we've had over 3 days of full data shown in Mythic Plus, Normal Raid, Heroic Raid, and World First Raiders are pushing Mythic Raid, it's a great time to look at which classes are doing the most damage over any other. What I have for you on screen is something I used to do for Season 1 of Dragonflight, which is comparing all of the different activities for the DPS classes, stacking those together, and then showing them all at once so you can see exactly how the DPS are performing, because obviously some specs are going to excel at raiding, some specs are going to excel at Mythic Plus, and in many cases some specs only excel at Mythic Raid or only excel at Heroic Raid based on the difficulty and the team comp that you're bringing into the group. And before we begin ranking from the top, let's look down at the bottom because I have some bad news for you. While there are already hundreds of logs for Mythic raiding clears in the new raid Amirdrasil, and there are already 2 guilds that are 6 out of 9 in clearing, and there's tons of data to show that these are getting killed and classes are being used. However, there are 3 classes on this list, 3 specs that have not shown any record in any of the world first Mythic pushing, and that's Survival Hunter, Marksmanship Hunter, and Destruction Warlock. And sad to say, those 3 specs are also doing pretty poorly in Mythic Plus and in Heroic Raid, and just didn't make the cut in anyone's team comp in any Mythic clears anywhere in the world. Now, obviously this is going to change in the coming weeks, and just keep in mind that 3.5 days worth of Mythic Raid progress is still a relatively small sample size, so you'll like to see these numbers start to even out over the next week or so as we start getting more guilds progressing through the Mythic Raid. But that being said, I think it's fun to look at the stats, how they are in the initial race to world first, to show what classes are being used the most and what classes are performing at their best. At the very top, we have Beast Mastery Hunter, Assassination Rogue, and Havoc Demon Hunter. These kind of all in the same boat. Beast Mastery is blowing everyone out of the water. The damage output is actually ridiculous. Now, typically Beast Mastery tends to start high and then slowly works their way to about the middle of the pack, or maybe even the top third towards the middle of the season. And some classes like Enhancement Shaman or Elemental Shaman, Shadow Priest, Balanced Druid, these classes that scale really well with highly optimized stats and gear, will start to move up to the top of the list. But it's not very often that we see Beast Mastery dominating everyone in all categories at the very top of the list total. And they also have some of the best logs to show in Mythic Raid as well. Demonology Warlock is number 4, and they're doing pretty well across the board. I think all the changes they got in Season 2 really did well for them. Outlawed Rogue is just under them in seat number 5, doing well in Mythic Plus, unsurprisingly, doing okay in Heroic Raid, and doing pretty well in Mythic Raid. Arcane Mage and Fire Mage are about the same, which is quite different than we saw at the very beginning of the expansion, where Arcane was blowing everyone out of the water and Fire and Frost were down at the bottom. Seeing Arcane and Fire together at the very start of the season is a good sign. Subtlety Rogue isn't knocking anyone out of the park, but they're not failing either. They're actually doing well, good, above average in every single category, which gives them a pretty nice spot here towards the top side of the list. Underneath that is Enhancement, and generally we do see Enhancement Shamans start out weaker in the start of the season, and as their gear gets better, their secondary stats become more accurate and lined up. They start to overtake other classes as they become more and more geared. Balanced Druid is lower than I thought. I actually expected going into week 1 of Season 3 that Balanced Druid was going to be in the top 5 here for these stats. Now, they're still exceptional at M+, and I'm actually pretty excited to see that most of the DPS outside of the bottom 4 here are pretty viable in Mythic Plus and tend to do quite well. Now, Frost DK, Devastation, Evoker, Fury Warrior, Frost Mage, Windwalker Monk, Arms Warrior, Retribution Paladin, Elemental Shaman, Unholy DK, and Feral Druid. I would kind of put all of these in about the average category. They're doing well in all categories. They're being brought to all groups, or most groups, and when they are brought, they tend to perform pretty well. Arms is a bit of a standout in normal content like Mythic Plus below key level 15 or so, and then Heroic Raid, Arms Warrior is doing well, but comparatively aren't doing as well in Mythic Raid when the difficulty cranks up. But I do want to highlight the Augmentation Evoker here, as even though they got a pretty big nerf at the start of Season 3, they're still doing insanely well in Mythic Plus. They're one of the best specs you can bring into a Mythic Plus team of 5, and they do pretty well in Heroic Raid as well, and they kind of keep up with everyone in Mythic Raid, though not quite as good as the top half of the list. Now, the one to keep your eye on this this week is going to be Affliction Warlock, because as you can see here, they are underperforming in Mythic Plus, they're underperforming in Heroic Raid, but they're actually doing insanely well in Mythic Raid, which tells me that when played properly, when heavily optimized, and when geared out, Affliction has a really good shot of being above the halfway point in these graphs, showing very high promise. But in your average, it takes, the difficulty, like the skill floor of Affliction is much higher than it was in past seasons, and many of the people that are playing Affliction now are bringing that average down. So as you get better gear and people get better at Affliction, we start to see those numbers rise up. So keep an eye on Affliction going into next week. And even though it's only been a couple days, I would hope to see some improvement for Survival, Hunter, Marksmanship Hunter, and Destruction Warlock, which are struggling quite a bit at the start of Season 3. If you're curious how classes are doing right now, the Race the World First is underway, and there's tons of streams that you can check out online on Twitch and YouTube and various places of all the best players in the world pushing their classes and specs to the brink. And right now we do have guilds fighting for first place to see who's going to get that mythic final kill. And I enjoy watching it a lot because not only do you get to see how people work through the challenges of the raid, and this tier does seem to be very well designed and lots of fun, we also get to see the damage numbers and the healing numbers and see where people start to fall and where people can start making some really clutch plays based on their class and their spec. So if you're interested, I'll leave a link down to some of the resources you can find the Race to World First online if you're not aware of what's going on. But that is where we sit for Week 1 DPS Rankings Season 3. We'll do this again next week just to see where the classes have stacked up and what's changed. And of course, we'll keep track of where the hot fixes and balance changes are coming in once everything kind of settles and Blizzard gets to see what they're looking at. And that's what I've got for you today. If you're looking for the tank or the healer rankings, I'll have those in a separate video, so look at my channel for those. Well, let me know what you think down below in the comments, what classes need a buff, what classes need a nerf, and what you thought was going to be the rankings going into Week 1. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.